what can I say about this book? What can't I say about this book? Cheeky, silly, a little bit magical, just ridiculous. What was going on in your brain that told you to write this book like this? Women. Period. And now I am insane. I guess I'm just gonna do this. Hello. I have played with the idea of starting a booktube for a while, because I read a lot of books and I have a lot of things to say about books, and I say these things to my friends, but there's also things I just don't say because I don't have a platform to say them on, so I guess I'm doing this now. Because it's a brand new month, I thought I would actually just go through the books that I read in May, because I read quite a few of them. And we will just go from there. On the year, I have read, I believe, a total of 105 books right now, I think. Let me show on my story graph. 105 right now, which is wild because my general goal for the year is 150 books. It's June, and I'm 70% through that goal. If I hit 200, that'll be crazy. I'm not expecting to hit 200, but the fact is that I could, and that's weird. So anyway, I read 31 books in the month of May, which is the highest total so far for a month so far this year. The first big read of May was finishing House of Leaves by Danielewski. I cannot believe that first of all, I ordered this book through the university lending system, so I borrowed it from a sister university in the city. It's a massive book. A lot of these books I don't have physically because I do a lot of library borrowing and digital reading, but that book was pretty thick, hardcover, and wide, textbook sized. If you don't know, House of Leaves is a truly bizarre creation. I hesitate to even call it a book, to even call it a novel. Man. As a writer myself, going through House of Leaves was what was going on in your brain that told you to write this book like this? The premise of House of Leaves is that there is this fake movie documentary created by this man, Davidson, for this house that he moves into with his wife and his children. And it's supposed to document moving into a new place and settling into a new routine. And then it turns out the house is super weird, messed up, possessed in some sort of way. So there's this guy who has written all of these notes, like an essay dissertation type observation about this fake movie. And the guy doing the editing has found all of these papers in an abandoned house next to this guy's dead body. So it's a guy writing about somebody who is writing about this fake movie made by this band. It's extremely convoluted, extremely meta, but half of the book is written in footnotes by the character of this editor that is going through and commenting on things, but he's not just commenting on this these notes that he's compiling together. He's also just basically keeping a journal in the notes as he slowly goes crazy because of this project, which is truly just bizarre and unsettling and not always pleasant to read because he's kind of a douchebag. I don't even know how to put together my thoughts on House of Leaves because it's so much of just you have to experience it. because me explaining things about this book does not translate anything. The experience of following a series of like 10 footnotes, flipping multiple pages, reading upside down, reading sideways, reading through little boxes that stretch 20 pages forward, and then reading those same boxes upside down 20 pages backwards to right where you started. That's a thing that happens. When I finish this book, I put it into one of my likewise lists that is books that you will enjoy if you liked the Magnus Archives. So far, I have 2 books on there. This is the second one. The first one is We Sold Our Souls by Grady Hendrix. That says, I think, as much as I could possibly say about House of Leaves. 4.5 stars. I really enjoyed it. I think it is neat from a narrative perspective. I would freaking love to study House of Leaves if it wasn't so impossible to study. Okay, moving on through some lesser reads that just kind of went by. At the same time that I took out House of Leaves, I took out The Brothers Karamazov because I went on choir tour at the beginning of May, where we went on a little road trip for 3 days. I expected to do a lot more reading on that trip than I did. I took 3 books with me on that trip, and I didn't finish any of them. I got like halfway through Brothers Karamazov on that trip, and then I had to come home and read it for like 3 more days. Brothers Karamazov is a book that I had wanted to read for years now. My older brother told me that he really liked it, and that was the first time that I was intrigued by it, and then I saw some quotes on Tumblr that really intrigued me, but nothing really properly prepared me for what this book was about. I somehow had no idea what it was about, and truly it took me until about halfway through to really understand what was even happening. The next book I found at a free library drop-off, and it was Anxious People by Fredrik Backman. This was also a recommendation from one of my favorite booktubers. She talked crazy about it. She did it as a buddy read. I just happened to find it in a free library, and I thought, hey, free book. Why not try it? It was pretty good. Interesting, fascinating story, I think I would say. Because it is about, basically a crime takes place, and all of these people are brought in to give their testimony of what happened, basically. So it's kind of a mystery, and you're figuring out, you don't really figure out until like the very end what actually happened in the crime. It's partially narrated by these 2 cops, which are a father and a son, figuring out kind of their backstory and how actually every character is secretly inherently linked to each other and have been for years. That was pretty interesting. Also, this is a Swedish author, which I didn't know going into it. So this is translated to English, and it references things about Sweden. And I thought that was really interesting because I've been studying Swedish for a few years just for fun. And I've always been super interested in Sweden and their culture. So this was super interesting. I had never, for some reason, I'd never thought to look into Swedish literature. So maybe I might have to. But I gave this 4 stars, which is my standard for I would reread this. And I would, since I own it, I might at some point reread it and do some annotating in it because it had some good points and some good quotes in it. So that was nice. Oh man. The next book is my first 5-star of May. And we need to talk about it. I put a hold on this book like months prior because it had kept coming up in recommendations from booktubers that I watched, on queer book recs, and just books that people were talking about that they loved, that they were giving such rave reviews of, and the cover is really, really cute. And that is none other than The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. What can I say about this book? What can't I say about this book? I loved it so much. I think I read it in 2 days. I was gonna say 1, but I think I started it like at night one day, and then I spent the rest of the next day reading it. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. I love all of the characters so much. the way that the story comes together and makes you fall in love with the characters, the slow burn of the love story in this book. I knew it was gonna happen. Like almost immediately I knew that it was gonna go down, but it wasn't like an agony waiting for it to happen. It was just like, this needs to happen when it happens for them. And then when it did, it was so good and sweet. Oh, the children in this book are just so precious. The world building, because, okay, if you don't know, House in the Cerulean Sea follows the story of kind of this social worker who investigates orphanages that take care of magical children. So there's a magical realism aspect to it. And he's really, really, really good at his job. And he loves his job because he cares deeply about these kids. So he's called in by upper management and given a brand new assignment to this problem case, basically. This orphanage that is for the higher level magical children, or just the weird ones people don't want to see, or that scare people, that people don't really want to deal with, don't want to think about. So they live on an island, shunned by their surrounding community. Like, people ignore that they're there. And he goes out, and he's originally just like, okay, I'm gonna be here for a month, don't worry about it, like, I'm just here to observe you, don't worry about me, it's fine. And they basically slowly, over the course of this book, adopt him. It's like found family to a T, absolutely. Like, what can we do to protect the vulnerable? What can we do to protect the literally the smallest of our world? And as someone who works with children often, I adored that messaging. It was so good. Anyway, 5-star book. I now have like literally everything that TJ Klune has ever written on my TBR, because I am so in love with his writing style, and also just the premises of all of his books that I've looked up so far are fascinating. And he really loves like queer found family and little magical realism bits, which are some of my favorite things ever. So I actually have Under the Whispering Door right now on my bookshelf from the library. That is in my immediate TBR, so I'm really hoping it stays as good as House of the Cerulean Sea is, because, man, fantastic book. Actually, one more thing on Cerulean Sea. I just want to read the quick review that I left on Storygraph. I want to crawl into this book and live in it. I want to see this story adapted into whatever other mediums will take it, so everyone can have the story. I want to believe in this kind of love and make it possible for others. I do wish I was there. If that doesn't sell you, I can't do anything else for you. Next up, I read the whole Silent Voice manga series. This was gifted to me by my older brother for Christmas, like over a year ago. And I hadn't read it, I wasn't in the mood to read it. He gifted this right after I like kind of faded out of my manga phase, so I just wasn't feeling it. But just a random day, earlier this month, I was sitting in bed all day and I was like, why not read 7 volumes of manga today? Why not? I know a lot of people really love the movie A Silent Voice. I actually haven't seen it yet. I need to do that still. But the manga didn't really do a whole lot for me. Like, I know that it was like supposed to be super emotional, like huge reflection on like bullying and suicide and, you know, the disabled community and stuff like that. But it was really just kind of meh for me. Like, I wasn't connected to any of the characters, really. Nobody was really a good person in this series, which I think was kind of the point, but that's not really something that I always like to read about. started really rough. I only gave the first 2 volumes 2 stars. It slowly got better. The third one was 3 stars, fourth one 3.5, same with the fifth one. I think my favorite was like the 6th or 7th, when like things were kind of getting towards the end, but just all over it kind of was just kind of meh to me. Maybe the movie is just better at the pacing of it, or the swelling of emotional scenes, but in manga form wasn't really my thing. Next I listened to some audiobooks. The first one was This Is What It Sounds Like, which is a book on music and like how different people listen to music, what that says about, well, not necessarily what that says about you, but just about like reflecting on how you listen to music and why, which was a really interesting thought exercise, I guess. The other one was the fantastic memoir I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jennette McCurdy. I gave that one 5 stars. I listened to it in one day. I listened to it while I was playing Stardew Valley, which was an interesting thing to be playing while listening to this book. Wow. I seriously, I have been thinking about some of the things that Jennette said in her novel for weeks now since listening to that. Oh boy. Heavy trigger warnings for eating disorders on this book, and like fat shaming, fat phobia, all of that. Massive trigger warnings. Honestly, I probably could have heeded those a bit better, but ooh. And like stories of, choosing yourself over what other people think of you. Oh, it was really good. Like, I know so many people were saying that it was really good, but I was still very happy to give it the 5 stars that it deserves. Yeah. Next, I read The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. This specific book I have had for years and just never got to reading it. I got this from Value Village probably 5 years ago. It's been sitting on my shelf. Honestly, I think it was probably sitting on the shelf outside my bedroom, and I recently put it in my shelf because I got a new bookshelf this month as well, which was a huge thing on getting me to read more, because suddenly it was like, oh, I can see all of my books and I want to read so much. But oh my goodness, Catcher in the Rye. I've seen some heat on this book. I've seen some people who don't like this book, probably because they had to study it in high school. I loved this book a lot. I particularly loved Holden Caulfield, the narrator, and I've seen people just absolutely destroy him or pull him apart for literally just being a teenage boy. Half of this book is him being like, I love my younger sister and I miss my brother, and I want to protect the children. I don't like war. I don't want war to keep happening. One of the things he literally says at some point is that if I could sacrifice myself to prevent any war from ever happening ever again, I would do it. I loved this book. I gave it a 4.25. The writing itself was nothing that crazy, and at some points I was like pushing myself to get through parts of it, so it wasn't like fantastic or anything, but I do think this would be something that I would want to teach high school children. Like, I understand why it has been taught in schools. I think that's super valuable. I would. Perhaps it's just been taught in a not great way. Then oh my goodness, I remember I went to the library and I was just running around looking at books and grabbing whatever I wanted off the shelves, and I left the library with I think I left the library with 7 books that day, but I read this one in the library before I left. And when I was about 14, I got really into the like social media poetry type things, as a lot of people did at that time in like 2015. is what made me love reading poetry. I have a rather large poetry collection. I do love reading poetry. But I cannot do social media style poetry anymore. I cannot. The book I read here was The Mermaid's Voice Returns in this one by Amanda Lovelace, which is the end of the Women Are Some Kind of Magic collection. I have definitely read the first one. I cannot remember if I've read the second one. I want to say I have. Either way, I'm not interested in going to find it right now because I'm just over her poetry. I remember when I read The Princess Saves Herself in this one when I was like 15, 16, and I loved it so much. I remember going crazy for that little book. Which, because at the time I needed that type of poetry and the things that she was writing about, I needed it. I do not need it anymore. I do not have the patience, do not have the time. I do not care about your page of 2-word stanzas. Not here for it. This book actually had some guest authors in it, and honestly, I preferred every single one of those over the main chunk of poetry, which was bad and painful. Yeah, wasn't the best book to force myself to sit through before I could leave the library. On the other hand, at that same library trip, I also picked up So Far So Good from Ursula K. LeGuin, which I loved. So thank goodness there is still hope in the poetry world, because yes, this collection was great. I gave it a solid 4 stars, which means that I would consider buying a copy for myself to have and to tab over and keep close to my heart. So that was a breath of fresh air after Amanda Lovelace. I also randomly decided to read the first Wayside School book, Sideways Stories from Wayside School, which is a children's novel. I read it really quickly, obviously, and it was great. It was so fun, but the reason why I read it is because I saw a tweet from one of the creators of Night Vale. I can't remember which one it was right now, but talking about how the style of Wayside School is something that inspired Night Vale and is emulated in Night Vale, and I freaking love Welcome to Night Vale. I love its weird, kooky storytelling and world building, so obviously I had to give this a try. And now this is like, I don't plan to be an elementary teacher, I want to be a high school teacher. Either way, I think I need to purchase all of these books and keep them in my classroom, because this is my favorite depiction of school and education and the teacher-student contract that I have ever seen in writing. It was fantastic. Cheeky, silly, a little bit magical, just ridiculous, but so sweet and precious. Yes, like literally one of the first stories is an awful teacher turning her students into apples. But everything after that, everything after that was great. I'm gonna skip ahead a little bit because there's a few big ones that I need to talk about separately. I also read Laziness Does Not Exist by Dr. Devon Price, which was talked about by a booktuber that I follow and just conveniently happened to be available at the library online, so I got that. It took me a weirdly long time to read it. Earlier in the year, I read Unmasking Autism by this author, and I freaking loved it. It was fantastic. It's one of my 5-star reads from this year. This one was a bit rougher, maybe because I listened to the first one as an audiobook, so it was really nice to just have him read to me. This one took me a while, ironically, because the whole premise of the book is kind of like being okay with taking things slow and taking your time with things. I ended up giving it a 3.75 stars. I don't know how much I would recommend it to other people. It wasn't anything too groundbreaking for me. If you are somebody that is still actively having a problem with taking a step back from your work and giving yourself time to take breaks, it might be better for that. But for me, I've been working through things like that in therapy. I've already like heard half of these things. It didn't really do a whole lot for me there. So yeah, that was kind of meh. In that same trip where I got all of those 7 library books, I also picked up Slouching Towards Bethlehem by Joan Didion. I think that's how you say that name. Which is a collection of nonfiction essays by this journalist that also are set during the 60s, 70s in the US. Okay, scrubbing back. The second 5-star novel on my stock is The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. Oh my god, this book. Oh my god, this book. This was gifted to me for my birthday on lend from a dear friend of mine, which was gifted to her from a mutual friend of ours. Holy crap, this book. This book, I keep saying that this book was like written for me, for everything that I love and adore in books and as myself, just as a person, because it's, oh my god. The main character is a university student studying video games. And he finds a book that has a story of something that happened to him when he was a young child. And it destroys his mind, blows him up. He becomes obsessed with finding out the author of this book and if there's any more like it and why the heck they were writing about him. How it was possible that this story from when he was like 5 or 6 or something was in this random book that he found. And it leads him to discover this like underground society of like bookkeepers, basically this big massive library that exists under the earth and is guarded by these like partially immortal beings. Oh my god. It was just beautifully written. The imagery, the building of this society, just gorgeous. And it's also interspersed by these tiny stories from this book that he picked up that is telling, well, that's a mild spoiler, but it's telling the story of some of the strange people that he encounters. Their weird, mysterious history written kind of veiled in these like fairy tales, folk tales. Oh my god, I feel I'm not entirely sure if everybody would enjoy this book as much as I did, because I just feel like it was written for me. Like, Erin Morgenstern knew that I was out here and I needed a book like this. Okay, I need to read the review that I left this book. Quote, I need a 6th star for this book only, but perhaps it is fitting that the star will always be missing. I had to read this book slowly because I knew it would take me under its spell and never give me back. Even though I took my time, I'm still grieving. This book knew more about me than I know about myself. I will be telling everyone about this book for always. That is about as much as I could possibly say about this book, because I feel like if I say too much, then it will get too overhyped and you won't really appreciate it properly. But oh my goodness. Anybody who loves magical realism, feeling like everyday magic is possible, and also just loves books and literature, you gotta read this. You have to read it. I'm sorry. I'm enforcing rules on it. You have to read this book. Wow. Okay, for those who don't know, I love Star Wars. And one of my close friends, their dad actually collects all of the Star Wars novels, which is super neat and a super great resource for me who enjoys reading the Star Wars books. So there is the original extended universe that exists beyond the main 6 episodes originally created was entirely through these novels. Before Disney rewrote what happens after episode 6, there was a whole bunch of novels exploring different possibilities there. And a trilogy that exists in that universe is the Thrawn trilogy, which I had started last summer because my dad owned a copy of the original first book of that trilogy. In that trilogy, we are introduced to a fascinating character that was exclusive to this trilogy in the EU, but was then brought to the Disney canon through the Star Wars Rebels animated series. Since then, 2 new trilogies have been written for this character. And now I am insane. So obviously I am talking about the multiple Thrawn trilogies that exist. I do not have the physical copy of the first Thrawn book, but I am rereading it through the audiobook. Yeah, I read it for the first time less than a month ago, and I'm already almost finished rereading it through the audiobook. That is how we're doing. Thrawn has become one of my new favorite Star Wars characters because he is so interesting and so autistic. And come on, he's blue. I love blue characters. Whether they're just coded as blue or, in Thrawn's case, literally blue. I love blue characters. What can I say about it? So there are 3 trilogies. Because I'm crazy, I am in the middle of all 3 trilogies at once. So actually, for all of them, I'm on the 3rd of the trilogy at the same time through the entire stream of things. This is with like Luke and Leia and Han and those crew. This is set post Empire. But the other 2, the Ascendancy series is set during the Clone Wars, so it's kind of earlier, whereas this one is set before the Battle of Yavin. Yep. Star Wars talk. If you don't understand that, that's okay. Anyway, Thrawn is so interesting, but also I'm freaking in love with his aide, Eli Vanto. He is absolutely one of my new favorite Star Wars characters. For one, just because he's just a little guy. He's just a weird little guy who loves math and numbers and is really smart, but doesn't realize it because his best buddy is Thrawn, who is a savant, basically. I've compared them to Star Wars Sherlock and John. Also, the Star Wars version of Spock and Kirk. Read that however you wish to. Anyway, this is to say, I've been reading all 3 trilogies at the same time. I am 2/3 of the way through all 3 of them. That is what I started doing in the month of May. Okay, moving on from Star Wars, we now have to talk about my new babies. The last of the selection of 7 library books that I got from that one trip that I mentioned was a book that I have considered reading for years, that I have heard about on Tumblr for years, that I thought I would know everything that was going on, and is part of why I didn't pick it up until now. It's a YA book. It's a YA fantasy book. I do generally like those, but I'm also, because I'm getting older, trying to steer away from those, trying to lean more towards the general adult books, trying to find my footing there. But of course I keep coming back to the YA section because sometimes they're just really good. Okay. This one is not one that I would call necessarily really good, but it did unfairly grab me so tightly. I'm still so mad at how much I loved this series, because it's not like I wouldn't. Anyway, I finally read the Simon Snow series. I somehow read all 500 plus pages of Carry On in one day. I loved it. Like, it was cringe and awful. And I was way too aware of how painfully 2015 it was. But besides that, I love all of the characters so much. And I had to finish the series immediately. Even though, like, it's weird because I liked the first novel. I liked how it ended. I thought it ended really well, really succinctly. Like, it didn't necessarily need a continuation. It stands super well on its own. You could just read Carry On and it would be fine. But there are 2 more novels. And because I love the characters so much, of course, I needed to read the other 2 novels. The second one is not as good as the first one, but it's also not bad. It is fun. The American road trip. You can't go wrong with an American road trip. You just can't. It's a fun time. I enjoyed it. I rated it less than the first one. The first one I gave 4.5 stars, which is pretty dang good. I gave the second one 4.25 stars. The emotional tension going on in this book was not my favorite. I was so just anxious like the whole time. But it did develop how much I love these characters even more. So that was great. But the third one, I think this is probably a controversial opinion, and entirely because I read these series at the age that I am, where I feel like most of the fans of the series came in before those second and third novels and developed their feelings and etc. relationships to the characters and the novel series then. And because I'm coming in with all 3 of them as a early 20s person reading them, it doesn't surprise me that I have gravitated towards the last novel and that my feelings and opinions on the characters and the world are quite different from a lot of people who I believe grew up with these characters. Man, the struggles that we are building through in this last one, Penny and Shepard and Agatha figuring out what they're doing with their lives, what they mean to each other, what it means to be friends, what it means to be their own separate person. Penny being away from Micah and Agatha being away from Simon, both just women. Period. One of my favorite things about this series is that Penny and Agatha are not just like second fiddle to Snow and Baz. They truly feel like fully fleshed out side characters, occasionally main characters. Like Penny, I would argue, is definitely a main character. She's not a side character. She's definitely a main character, and I love her. So where is Penny's trilogy? Where is the Penelope Bunch trilogy? Okay? Because I would read it. I would read the crap out of that. Because, okay, to me, pretty much anybody under 18 is now my child. I am adopting them. I have paternal instincts. Child, I will protect you. Come to thee. So because in the first book, these kids are like 17, that is how I grabbed onto them. I grabbed onto them as children. And then by the end of the series, they are 20. So they're still my babies. They're getting older, but they're still my babies. Anyway, my beloved Simon. Okay, I need to wrap up talking about this series because we don't need to go on about it. The point is, I really loved it. I didn't expect to love it, and I did. Now they live in my heart. I have created a Pinterest board, and today I made cherry scones. Anyway, those are my new boys. I'm not gonna recommend this series because, like, for my conscience, I don't want to recommend this series. Which feels bad saying that I loved it, but I don't want to recommend it. But it makes sense to me. Like if you've already read it, dope, awesome. If you're a teenager, definitely read it. I would definitely recommend it to like 16 to 18. Great age range for that. Like I'm mildly ashamed at how much I enjoyed it at my age. So why am I talking like I'm ancient? I'm not even that old. Okay, last thing. In the fall, I am doing a adaptation study on The Witcher. Looking at the novels and then the games and the Netflix series as well as the comics as an independent study with one of my professors. So I have started doing my reread of the series, and in May I read 2 of the 8 books. Sword of Destiny, which is the second prequel novel, and then Blood of Elves, the first of the actual plot novels, I guess we can say. Neither of these are my favorite. Blood of Elves is my least favorite of the entire series, I'm pretty sure. Just saying something because I do enjoy this series. There is a reason I wanted to study it, but this book does not do anything for me. Like, this is like all of the inciting incidents over and over again, and I don't find them that interesting. Also, my study is mainly focused on Dandelion, and he is barely in this novel, so that's another reason why it's not really my cup of tea. Like, both of the prequels are really fun just because they are shorter stories and they get to their point a lot quicker, and they're really just little snapshots building the world up, which I really love. Although they do have important lead-ups to the main plot series that do, in my opinion at least, make them required to read the proper series. And, well, I won't get into the adaptation part of it. I will probably have an entire thing to say about that once I start into my study. Anyway, that is all 31 novels that I read in the month of May. In general, I think pretty good. June so far, I think I probably already read at least 3 books in June, and it's the 3rd. I also already DNF'd 1 book in June, so maybe it's not going good. I don't know. Most of what I'm going to end up reading in June is my borrowed books from my friend in France, so we will see how those go. Anyway, for those who sat through this, thank you for listening to my random thoughts and feelings. Let me know if I should keep making this, I guess? Cool. Anyway, I have to go finish reading my Witcher chapter for the day because I paused in the middle of it to come do this.